Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku became an adult part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story Kenmai from 𝗬𝗧𝗏. So let's start the video. 𝗬𝗏 chapter text. When Midoriya wanted something, he tried his best to set his foot forward and reach for it with both hands. He's always been that type of person. Hell, even something as small as taking all the groceries up to the house in one trip. Though inevitably ignoring all the words of warning his mother gave him about everything spilling, he still did it. There was no one around to see him spill the cereal in 𝗬𝗧𝗏 driveway anyway. But he carried everything in one trip nonetheless. At the fresh age of 18, he'd decided that he was finally ready to leave the so-called nest, as his mother called it. He knew the thought of him leaving saddened her a little, but she was also very supportive at the least. In no time, he found himself with a small apartment with the help of some friends that wasn't too far out of town, and found work part-time at a little coffee shop several blocks down from that. Luckily, the college he was going to was in just the right area of closeness to both work and home. Friends came to him fairly easily, why he didn't know. But he'd formed some of the closest bonds he didn't think would be possible for such a short time. And before he knew it, he was already settled in. It had already been a full year there on his own, and he wouldn't have it any other way. As such, he found himself waking up pretty early that morning. His landlord, a lovely short old lady, had told him another tenant was moving in within another day or two, so that he should be on the lookout for them, and to do the neighborly thing and say hi. "Of course I will. I hope we can get along too," he'd said to her. She'd smiled and kindly patted his hands. She was such a nice old woman. At times he'd almost found himself calling her Granny, though he was pretty sure she wouldn't have minded. She'd sent him on his way shortly after that, a few slices of freshly baked banana bread in his hands to go, and waved before she had made her way back to the front office building. Midoriya smiled to himself as he remembered the scene, carefully putting on his shoes and looking at his face in the mirror one last time. With a satisfied check, he made his way out the front door, humming as he locked up. It had been a day since the landlord talked to him, but the apartment next to his was still as silent as ever. No moving boxes in the halls or anything to be seen anywhere for that matter. The tenant wasn't here as of yet, obviously, but he'd be sure to offer to help out with their bags or boxes if he happened to catch them on the way back from his shift. Who knows? Maybe they'd even hit it off and be friends. After catching a seat on the bus and playing around with the apps on his phone, Midoriya was at his work within 10 minutes or so. It was a decent walking distance, but he really didn't have the time today. And with no car of his own, the bus was usually his best option. Universal Americano UA, as all the workers called it for short, was an amazing place to work at, as cheesy as the name was. It was a quaint, cozy little coffee shop, the kind that had calm music or the latest hits playing softly in the background. Most people came in to relax and work, other hogging up space with friends in the few beanbag chairs they owned. But really, it was an all-right place. And on top of that, the pay was actually pretty decent enough. Their coffee wasn't anything to sneeze at either, and honestly, it was some of the best he'd tried since moving out here. Midoriya has stumbled in one afternoon, drained from a really rough week of starting classes sometime last year, and mindlessly dragged himself around the area. Of course, he was ecstatic to see they were hiring, and he was even more surprised when the manager hired him that same day. Midoriya chalked it up to his luck finally kicking in, but he wasn't going to deny fate. Ochako, a girl from his physics and English language class, had been working that same shift. Loud curiosity when she recognized him. He stuck around if only to order something and talk to her. And from there, they'd gotten really close. From that day forward, she'd introduced him to a whole new group of tight-knit people, some already in his classes or persons he'd passed by on campus, while others were new, fresh faces, eager to befriend him as well. Needless to say, his social group grew very quickly, and with that more squad hangouts followed after, as Denki had called it. There was this unspoken rule between them all where everyone that was free would get together on Friday nights. It was just a chance to slack off and play games, talk and do other sleepover-esque stuff at whoever's unlucky house or apartment they chose for the night. He was probably next on the hit list, to be honest. Yikes. That was going to be fun to clean up afterwards. As Midoriya walked in the building, he found was instantly hit with the alluring aroma of coffee beans grinding together somewhere out front. There was a faint scent of cinnamon and nutmeg wafting in the air. The drip drop of fresh brew in the machines, and the sound of 2% skinny milk being poured in a cup over the counter. He smiled as he put on his apron and made his way out the staff room. The smells only grew stronger once the door opened, and he hurriedly made it to a spot behind the counter. Kirishima and Todoroki greeted him briefly, the redhead turning back to the coffee machine as Todoroki continued talking to a young customer about their order. It wasn't that busy at the moment, but the morning crowd was sure to come in sooner or later. Midoriya glanced at the clock, wondering vaguely to himself where Ochako was. She had her late moments, yeah, but he didn't see her in the break room while he was there. The girl was usually behind the counter during this time, chatting up customers and excitedly practicing her foam art skills. She was very good at hearts and smiley faces. Everything else was a bit of a mess, but the customers never really seemed to mind much. The ones that hit on her never got any art at all though. Somehow that was a lot colder than a badly shaped foam art of a flower. He idly played with the cup displays. As if the universe was reading his thoughts, he felt his phone vibrate in his right pocket. He made sure the manager wasn't around before quickly snatching up his phone. He raised a brow at the familiar cheesy name. 𝗧𝗵𝗃. Hey, Izuku. 𝗧𝗵𝗃. 𝗧𝗑𝗃. Come to think of it, you probably won't see this for a while. 𝗧𝗵𝗃. You should be at work by now, right? Ugh, 𝗧𝗵𝗃. Can't come in today, SRY. I forgot to text you earlier, haha. Floaty got out of her cage and Tsuyu is helping me look for her. Kirishima happened to see him looking at his phone and unabashedly asked, That Uraraka? Midoriya spared him a glance before he started typing. Yeah, apparently she's not coming today. Oh right. Her hamster went Mia. He scratched his head. I bet the little furball is probably just hiding out under her bed or something. Her room's really messy. You're one to talk. He nodded in agreement anyway. The last time he visited her room, it looked like a major had tornado passed through. And that was only after she tidied up all of her stray books. Game nights were hectic. I'm sure she'll find him though. Hopefully. He shooted her a quick text because leaving someone on read was a nightmare, and he would never want to pass that anxiety on to anyone. Good luck. 𝗧𝗵𝗃. I'm sure he'll turn up eventually. Try putting the little banana treats out that he likes in a corner. Oh, and some water. I read somewhere that they usually stick to walls when they crawl around if it helps. 3 The bell above the door chimed. A couple people probably fresh out of classes walked in soon after. Looks like the morning crowd was coming in shortly. With that, he closed his phone and went to work by Kirishima. Hey Izuku? He looked up from the machine curiously. Todoroki nodded in his direction and waved his hand towards him. He smiled and walked over. What's up? He eyed the people on the other side of the counter. Luckily, the line wasn't extremely long. Most people were just tiredly waiting on their orders. After all, it was mid-morning. The line peaked in the early morning, around lunchtime, and in the evening at best. Any other time of day, the atmosphere was much more lax and slow-paced. But people were all heading to their respective classes or jobs by now, so he figured it was fine to chat for a moment. Can you take over my position for a little while? I just need to go to the bathroom really quickly. Oh yeah, it's no problem, Shadow. The other gave him a small smile before turning and walking through the employee door. Midoriya glanced at his phone and was about to check his email when he heard someone clear their throat from over the counter. He jumped and looked up. A customer who looked very angry scowled at him. Oh shoot, right. Just his luck that he didn't see this customer standing there. Midoriya quickly put his phone away, customer service smile already on his face, as he noticed the other's mood. Good all-employee mode setting in. Hi there, sir. Sorry for the wait. Welcome to 𝗧𝗑𝗄 Coffee. What would you like today? The man glanced at the menu for a long while before he looked back at Midoriya, his eyes then deciding to settle on the countertop. All black is fine. A medium or whatever. Do you mean a grand? The customer seemed to bristle at being corrected, obviously taken aback, but very much so trying to keep an air of confidence. Sir, "A fucking what?" said customer, who was blonde. Midoriya noticed he'll call him Blondie, shifted slightly. The frown from before was back on his face again. But the longer Midoriya looked at him, he wondered if maybe he frowned a lot in general. Midoriya swallowed and quickly went to get the cup. "Tea this size cup. $1,000. Is that fine? I don't know why y'all don't just say medium in the first place, but shit sure. Okay, that'll be $5.50. One moment, sir." Midoriya quickly left the counter to prepare the cup. There wouldn't be much reason to have Kirishima make it since it was just this one customer. He could see the redhead curiously watching the two though, arms folded and ready to walk over if he needed help. With a steaming cup of black coffee prepared, he brought it to the counter, taking the money from the other man. He was pretty startled when he first saw him practically yelling out his responses, but looking closer, this customer was actually pretty attractive. It's a shame he frowned and scowled so much though. Maybe he had a really nice smile under all that? Or a really dorky one. He'd like to see his smile. Honestly, he just wants to reach over and fix his face. Push his cheeks up in a fake smile or, well, just something. Actually, that might just be a one-way trip to a major suicide mission. Could he actually even smile? Why was he so hung up on this one customer anyway? They'd probably never meet after this one exchange. Heaven knows if Midoriya went to a local Starbucks and asked for a medium-sized drink, he'd be embarrassed for the rest of the day. The thought just makes his insides curl. Attractive features aside though, Blondie was still pretty intimidating. Those eyes of his really glared right into you. And those beautiful blonde lashes of his weight. Glaring. Midoriya came out of his musings to see the customer furious. The cup of coffee spilled and dripping over the counter. But more importantly, all over the bottom half of his nice t-shirt, the liquid spilling onto his black jeans. When did he? Kirishima had shouted something to him and rushed over with a handful of tissues, but he was too utterly mortified to hear what. He spilled the coffee on the customer. He spilled hot scalding coffee on the customer. The customer who is shouting profanities left and right, and now kneeling to the floor in pain. Shit. Oh God, I am so sorry, shit. Oh God. Kirishima was at his side with a cold towel, quickly offering it to the blonde as he glared at the stain. Are you, okay man? Kirishima asked. The redhead barely flinched when the customer turned to yell at him. Do I look fucking fine to you, hair for brains? Kirishima outrightly gasped in offense. Pouting, he let the other be, standing up to go back to wiping the counter. The man was still on the ground, the coffee cup at the very least disposed of now, and the counter quickly wiped of the mess. Kirishima was on his way to get the mop when Midoriya stopped him. Kirishima, tell 𝗧𝗪𝗏 I borrowed his keys. I'm gonna take him to the hospital. Cover for me, please. You're whatting the what now? He might have severe burns. Or something. Not only is that gonna look back on the company, but I also feel really bad for not paying attention in the first place. I'm kinda rambling out of nerves now, but I hope they don't fire me. He barely gave himself time to breathe before he ran to the back to grab the keys, just as Todoroki was returning from the bathroom. With eyes wide, he watched the other snatch his keys. Izu. I'll be back. With his apron off and keys in his hand, he stooped next to the blonde man again. Midoriya heard Kirishima call to Todoroki from the back, but their voices faded in the background as he went to reach for the customer. He saw him glare, but wince when he moved his hand. God, I'm still really sorry about all this. Please let me at the very least take you to the hospital to get checked out. Please. That's the least I can do for you right now. I don't know how else I'd be able to make it up to you. Truly. The other watched him up and down for a moment, as if he could do worse than spill boiling hot coffee on him. Actually, wait. He could throw another cup of hot coffee on his face and leave him to die right there on the floor or something. Just like that. Blondie eyed Midoriya's hands in suspicion, only slightly relieved when they were empty. There was indeed no hidden death coffee. Fucking fine. I don't need you to help me up though. Ain't like I'm damaged. Despite his warnings, Midoriya still went for it anyway, even if the other really didn't need the extra assistance. It felt like the right thing to do in the moment. With surprising strength, he helped the man stand, and didn't spare a glance back to his co-workers as he helped him out the door to find 𝗧𝗪𝗏's car. That was such a hectic day. That was a day in which everything decided to go wrong for the fun of it. Midoriya was just about ready to dive into his bed and curl up in a ball of regret and embarrassment. He stepped off the bus, feet dragging on the ground, and walked into the front building. He tiredly waved at the old woman, telling her to stay safe and have a good night before getting in the elevator to the second floor. He was too tired to climb up the flight of stairs as short as the distance was. The drive to the hospital was awkward and tense to say the least. A quiet but angry air radiated from the blonde the whole way there as he refused to look at Midoriya. Midoriya sent him concerned glances stiffly every now and then, but he did have to keep his eyes on the road. Katsuki Bakugou, as he learned was the guy's name, was freakishly weird. He'd gotten a slight burn, but not deep enough to leave any major damage or marks. The doctor said it was merely a first-degree burn, but Bakugou seemed to somehow be slightly resistant to that type of heat. The burn would leave nothing more than a slight spot to the affected area, but not enough to stay there long term. Hearing that only got him thinking though. Maybe he took a lot of boiling hot showers and drank a lot of steaming hot drinks or something. The human body really was something. Okay, he wasn't sure if it worked exactly like that, but that was all he could come up with in his panic-riddled brain. He promised to make it up to him though. In Midoriya's regrettable mistake, the owner of the store had told him to tell Bakugou that they owed him a free cup of coffee, and he'd be given a discount on their baked treats at the very least. Midoriya was just glad there hadn't been any major charges, and more importantly, he still had a job. Hell, the blonde might even just decide to stay away as far as possible from coffee shops in general for a while after this incident. And he really wouldn't blame him if he did. Midoriya yawned when the familiar sound of the elevator chimed, the lift stopping on his floor. Great. He was one step closer to his bed, and another step closer to forgetting about this horrific day. He couldn't wait to curl up in his bed with some takeout. Yeah, that sounded nice. Stepping out of the elevator, he stopped dead in his tracks near his door. It seemed like the new neighbor was here. Boxes scattered haphazardly in the hallway, and the sounds of muttered cursing spewing out as they lifted another heavy box from somewhere next door. See, that would have been more than fine and all, and Midoriya would have already ran over to greet them and help out. But that voice. He heard that voice before, and his dread only grew when his so-called new neighbor finally stepped out again, presumably to get the next box. The sight Midoriya was met with was more than alarming. All his fears in that moment had been confirmed, and he'd never wished to go back in time more than ever. It was the person from earlier at the coffee shop. The person he burned. Katsuki Bakugou. The man in question was currently in the middle of lifting another box inside. He hadn't noticed the other just yet, quiet as a mouse. Seeming to sense that someone was staring at them though, he carefully dropped the box at his front door. Stretching slightly, he turned to stand up straighter. Much to his displeasure, Midoriya was close enough to hear his back crack slightly. He stilled when their eyes met, Bakugou merely blinking as he also noticed him. They both stood there in silence in some sort of weird standoff, unsure of what to do next. The first to move was Bakugou. Promptly he turned his head and continued lifting his box inside. Midoriya heard the door shut quickly after that, the few other boxes still remaining outside. He frowned at the offending packages, turning to look at the closed door down the hall. He had a feeling Bakugou wasn't going to be coming outside again anytime soon. Midoriya sighed. Well, this was just his luck. Not only did he spill scalding hot liquid over someone at work today and have to take them to the hospital, but it turns out that someone was apparently his new next-door neighbor. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Lovely. It was a bright, rainy Saturday morning. Though those two weren't things that usually go together, but regardless, Midoriya enjoyed the rain. It made everything in the immediate atmosphere much cooler, the air around it all giving this cloudly but calming serene feeling, and not to mention, it helped the plants out in tons of ways. The rain was just a true MVP all around. Even seeing something as simple as the people out and about on the streets in their raincoats, holding all their many stylish umbrellas as they hurried to get where they needed to be was satisfying in a sense. And drinking warm tea or milk while finishing the newest seasons of his favorite shows filled him with a certain kind of bliss. It was a bright and warm feeling despite the cold weather. That was the best way he could describe it really. He could stare outside his window for who knows how long just watching the water splash on the road, or watching it splash off the leaves of the trees downstairs. It was all very hypnotizing, really. Also, there was a strong urge to jump in a bunch of puddles each and every time. The inner kid in him always coming out. But then he had to remind himself he was an adult. Right. An adult. An adult that was currently in a pair of panda print onesie pajamas, very cute, he might add as he made his way outside to check if he had any mail in the lobby. He'd rather the old lady keep all his packages than have them stay by his front door while he was away. In his defense, though, it was like 6 a.m., and he happened to wake up early after pretty much passing out as soon as he got inside. He just wanted to get his mail and dash back upstairs before anyone could see him. I mean, who woke up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday anyway? Oh, 𝗵𝗃𝗃, that's who. Midoriya stepped out of his apartment only to see his new neighbor, Coffee Regret Man, as he internally called him. Never mind that he still remembers his name. It wasn't like he was contemplating all his life's worst decisions, and the coffee thing was super high on the list. Not at all. He hadn't seen the other in 2 whole days, making sure to avoid him and hope that they didn't show up at his work again. The whole coffee spilling ordeal was a mess within of itself, and he really did not want it to happen again. Better yet, he was more than fine succumbing to a life of hermitude in the hopes of never seeing the blonde ever again. But here he was stepping out into the hall. Bakugou was wearing a tight black tank top, his legs seemingly very fit in his black Adidas pants. He was tucking his foot into his white tennis. The heel was out slightly, and he was in the middle of fixing it in. But that was when he finally noticed Midoriya. He looked up at him, a headphone bud in his ear and his phone in hand. Was that Pokemon Go he was playing? Midoriya opted to pretend like he wasn't looking at his phone, and instead decided to just try and act as casual as one could. Morning. It took the time to finally adjust his shoes, tapping his heel for good measure. Coffee spiller. Midoriya physically choked for a moment. What are you doing here? Why are you outside right now at that? Sure as shit, I live here now, you know. Oh yikes. Well, Midoriya knew that for sure. But why did fate play its hand this way to have them meet again under these circumstances? Midoriya's face must have shown what he was thinking, because the other suddenly continued. Morning run. I want to check out the area more. He felt around for his keys and turned to his door. Midoriya heard him snort offhandedly. Nice onesie. He could feel his face heating up. Dear God. Midoriya wanted to jump into a hole and just die. He already forgot he was wearing this damn panda onesie. This is just too much. This is like the opposite of praying to God and him not answering. God just wants him to get fucked. It was time to rid himself of this horribly embarrassing situation. Yeah, well, I'll see you around maybe. Hope you got unpacked fine. Bye. Midoriya quickly turned to go back into his apartment. Mailed coupons be damned, he could get them later. He just needs a nice bowl of cold cereal and horrible pop songs on repeat as he curls up in bed and regrets all his life choices once again. Midoriya was this close to turning the knob when the last thing he expected to happen actually happened. Hold up. He froze and turned to look at the other boy. Bakugou seemed to be trying to get his words together for a moment before continuing, shifting the weight from one foot to the next. I'm not like inviting you because I want to be friends or anything. That's one of the last things I need right now, honestly, he huffed. But I bought too many damn ingredients for the move-in, and I need to use it all up. I don't want it all to spoil or whatever. Midoriya raised a brow in question. Was he? Anyway, I'm saying you're free to come over and just watch some movies or something sometime. I don't know. He shrugged, checking something on his phone. I can't eat it all. You like food, don't you? He frowned at his phone before looking up expectantly. Midoriya blinked. His face only morphed into that of more confusion. I do? He does like food. Okay, good. He lazily put his other earphone in. Come over tomorrow. He blinked once, then twice. Sure? All right, well, Bakugou cleared his throat. Tomorrow. With that, the blonde quickly locked his door. He jogged past, muffled music playing from his earbuds as he passed, leaving Midoriya standing outside and staring at where he just stood. Strange. That was the only word coming to mind. He was honestly sure the guy hated his guts, especially with the way he walked off while he was unpacking. Huh. Wait. Was this like a date thing or something? As much shit as he plagued this guy with, he was being decent and still talking to him. Let alone he wanted to hang out with him for some strange reason. He'd need to talk to someone about this. That night Midoriya found Todoroki on his living room couch, complaining about how he needed to redecorate his furniture again, and that the offer was still up to go shopping. Midoriya fondly watched as he stuffed popcorn in his mouth. Some old Sailor Moon rerun was playing on his laptop that was connected to the TV. Every now and then he'd hear the other whisper a line from the show, obviously having watched it a few times. A classic truly. So let me get this straight. A brief thought passed through his head that went like, which your sexuality is far from. But he held himself back. Todoroki paused to shift on the couch next to him, the bowl of popcorn shifting a little too close to the edge for comfort, nearly toppling over at that. Midoriya was quick to stop it, taking it from his lap altogether. He inspected a piece when his best friend seemed to finally string his words together. The really mean customer, who you had to take to the hospital, is now by some pure coincidental luck your new neighbor, and get this, he asked you on a hangout date. Todoroki shook his head in disbelief. Wild. It's not a date, I think. He grabbed a handful of popcorn in exasperation. I mean, I don't know. As if to show his frustration, he angrily threw the handful at his mouth and chewed quickly. The few bits of popcorn that didn't make it managed to fall on the couch, which Todoroki picked up and ate himself. Todoroki raised an eyebrow at his friend, who quickly swallowed the food in his mouth. With dry lips, he fumbled to grab some water. He saw me in my onesie. He sadly motioned to his current outfit, then decidedly reached for some more food. I was mortified. Something seemed to click suddenly in the other's head at hearing this. Wait, that's it. Todoroki suddenly sat up and snapped his fingers, Midoriya still frowning as he chewed. I've got it. It's like one of those I think this person is cute, but I'm gonna be passive-aggressive and vague or something. Like those kids that bully people they like in kindergarten. He probably got less angry about the whole situation since you're cute. Absolutely nothing you said just now made sense, Shouken. Plus, this is an entirely different case, and the whole kids that bully their crush thing is really. Midoriya made a noise of distaste and awkwardness. Yeah, I know that, but logistically speaking, it's the only thing I could really compare it to off the top of my head. He fell back on the couch cushions. What I'm saying though is that maybe he feels a little bad about being super angry and dodgy at you. But he also suddenly realized you're cute and wants to woo you. In some weird roundabout way. He shrugged. I mean, I'd date you if I wasn't taken. Anyone would be lucky to date you, and I mean that. And he really did sound like he meant it. Exceedingly happy to even have him as a best friend. Midoriya nudged him in the side, playful and well-meaning. He appreciated his best friend just as much as the other appreciated him. But they did have more important things to talk about. Listen, he said, we can just hang out. Maybe that's like watching a movie and chatting. Yeah. He did say movies, didn't he? Oh God. Wouldn't that be really awkward then? Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy. I spilled coffee all over you and mortally wounded both our egos. But more so mine, what's up with that? He could hear himself already rambling, his nerves and worries starting to catch up to him. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, I don't even know what he's into. The very few times we talked have always left me awkward or frustrated. That car ride to the hospital was extremely tense. I swore he was going to yell at me just for breathing. Then we would have swerved right off the road. Death by Blondie will be all over the headlines. Maybe they would have even put it on my grave. Blondie. He seemed amused by the name, opting to lightly ignore Midoriya's rambling. Izuku, please, it didn't seem that bad. Midoriya looked at him in silence, mouth set in a thin line. Maybe he does have a bit of a temper. At least from what I've seen and heard. He raised an eyebrow at Todoroki. Okay, he's got some issues. But I've never seen someone approach you this way. It is strange to say the least. Midoriya could do nothing more than groan. It's such a yikes situation, I don't know where to begin. Maybe he really does have a sudden crush on you. Like some sort of shoujo love interest. Maybe this is your chapter 1. Extra yikes, a pillow gets thrown at his face. Gah. Come on, don't worry too much about it. If it flops then, Todoroki tapped his lips thoughtfully. You move out the apartment complex immediately, leaving behind the area, changing your appearance, name and completely leaving your current job behind. From there, you become a secret agent, hack his files, and give him malware or something. I can't guarantee my coding skills are up to par, but I'll try. Intricate. Nice. Definitely sounds like a plan. He threw the pillow back on the couch. Could use a little less of me moving out though. The squad takes care of him for you. Permanently. Midoriya laughs at that, falling back onto the couch. Todoroki smiled as he wiped at the corners of his eyes a little. It was always nice to see Izuku happy. After recovering from his laughing spell, Midoriya turned his attention back to the TV. Come on, let's do something else for now. We have a whole night of shitty movies to judge ahead of us. 𝗧𝗵𝗲. The redhead actually gave him a look at that. Sharknado is a cinematic masterpiece. You better watch your mouth. Either that, or we binge watch more Naruto. That's the one with the ninjas, right? Todoroki actually seemed to consider this for a few moments before wrinkling his nose in reluctance. Something that absolutely amused Midoriya. You drive a hard bargain, but perhaps something else. The night continues on with them talking and laughing together. They single-handedly pile through a wide array of snacks. A movie and 3 episodes of R&Hi Todoroki absolutely insisted before Midoriya passes out. Todoroki is in the middle of talking about the current episode when he finally notices and rolls his eyes, a fond smile on his face. He watches a few more episodes by himself in the quiet of the night before deciding to sleep. He sets up all their blankets on the ground in the living room, dragging Izuku to more comfortable position that won't kill his neck or back in the morning. He passes out next to him in a comfortable pile on the floor immediately after. Midoriya wakes up feeling groggy the next morning. A note stuck to his forehead, and honestly, who knows how long it's been there. The bright sunshine leaking through his curtains blinds his sleep-ridden eyes, and for a short time he recoils under the sheets again, basking in its comforts despite being on the hardwood floors. Now that he's awake, though it was proving difficult to get back to sleep, and so he tried to get used to the sudden light. He lays there tiredly for a long while and yawns. The space next to him is empty, his mind slowly catching up from the night before. That's right. Todoroki had an impromptu sleepover for the night, to help him with his little crisis. Stretching slightly, he groans, taking in his surroundings before he reaches for the note somewhere on his head. Peeling it off, he's met with Todoroki's neat handwriting, taking a bit of time to register it in his still sleepy state. He wrinkles his nose. You passed out first again, so you owe me ice cream, no takebacks. Also, I left earlier this morning, as you can tell, because of the cats. Ida's still out working on his college thesis at the library, and you know how the cats get if they're alone too long. Clothes everywhere. It's a mess, really. Anyway, I grabbed some cereal to go. Gonna give you that bowl back later, if that's all right. 𝗧𝗵𝗃. Midoriya sat up slowly, wiping his mouth of any stray drool and grimacing. Yuck. He felt himself stretching again and blinked, a little more alert now. He looked around, trying to locate his phone in the mess of blankets he was on. Todoroki had at least folded the blanket he covered himself with, the fabric folded neatly on top of the couch. He spotted his phone on top of the coffee table. Squinting at the brightness, he saw that it was only 10 a.m. There were a few messages from his friends. He assumed they were about who he was going to be spending his time with today, and let out a long exhale. He fell back on the sheets again, taking a moment to really wake up before he hopped in the shower to get his day going. After he felt more awake and got some food, he scrolled through his messages, replying to them all as some early morning sitcom played. 𝗧𝗵𝗃. What's this? I heard about you hanging out with the coffee spill boyfriend 𝗧𝗵𝗃. I miss work one day. 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗃. Izuku. Is Todoroki joking? Or are you just that nuts? Listen. I had a moment of weakness several times. I fucked up a little. Not a lot, though, maybe. I hope it goes fine. He rolled his eyes at the next message until something caught his attention from Kirishima. 𝗵 very important bro. Izuku. 𝗵 very important bro. You are really gonna hang out with hospital dude? Seemed really shouty lol 𝗵𝗃𝗍 very important bro. Haha. Todoroki sent me some pics of last night BTW. 𝗵 very important bro. Sent an image. 𝗵 very important bro. Sent an image 𝗵 very important bro. Sorry I couldn't make it last night BTW. Me and Denki were hanging out d how dare he take pics of me while I sleep. He doesn't deserve that ice cream I bought him. And taking away his dairy privileges also it may be. At the hanging out thing I mean. And gross. You guys are cute. It's fine though, maybe we all can hang out another time 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗃 speaking of Kaminari. Denki to my heart. Izu lol this Bakumo person sounds interesting based on what IG told me. Denki to my heart. Actually. Tell him to follow me and IG on our Twitter, or Insta or our snaps Denki to my heart. Shameless plug 𝗬𝗏 https://Twitter. Denki Kaminari. No. I'm not promoting your accounts. I don't even know this guy. I doubt he'd follow you guys either way. Also it's Bakugou sent an image. He stopped scrolling briefly to get dressed a little more decently. He was nervous to say the least. How would something like this even work? He glanced at his phone again to see that a new message had recently come through in the midst of his daydreaming. Hot coffee regrets. The door's gonna be unlocked, so come over whenever. Midoriya nearly dropped his phone. He fumbled to grab it in the air for a few seconds before sighing and looking at it again. He blinked when he saw the notification. The message simply staring back at him. When and how did he get his num? Oh right. He'd gotten Bakugou's number at the hospital in a flurry of panic, so that he could check up on his burns, even though it turned out that the damage was pretty minimal. But he still wanted to be sure thinking back on it. Maybe Bakugou had still seen the gesture as something else, and that was why he got asked out. Though who in their right mind would ask out someone who sent them to the hospital? To hang out. Platonically. Midoriya scratched his cheek as he thought this over. Well, he didn't necessarily not need his number now. But he was living next to him now for goodness sakes, so what was the point? He wasn't sure how to reply back seeing, as there was only a wall separating the two of them. So he decided not to respond back. Anxiety aside, it ate at him regardless anyway. He'd planned to head on over soon anyway. It was already a little over lunchtime by now, and he was more than awake thanks to the light breakfast he had. Yeah, it should be fine to make his way over now. Right now. Going over. Soon. Okay, he was a little nervous. He stalled for time by tying his shoes extra carefully. He tidied up the living room, and his bedroom, then the kitchen. And after he was done with that, he examined his nails for dirt and took a once over in the mirror one last time. Fluffing up his hair and wiping his face, he finally left his apartment. Locking his door, he made his way down the hall a little until he found himself in front of Bakugou's door. Midoriya stood there for a little while, unsure if he should go through with this or not, but finally gained a bit of courage. He steeled his nerves and counted to 3 to himself before knocking twice and waiting. It was then that he remembered the other's message, and tentatively he decided to just turn the knob. Oh, he really did leave it unlocked. That's kinda dangerous. But then again, Bakugou seems to be the type of person people probably wouldn't even dream of messing with. As soon as the door opened, a powerful aroma of cooked food wafted past him. It smelled warm and inviting, a faint sense of spice in the air. He looked around in surprise. Of course the apartment wasn't that much to see, seeing as it was pretty identical to his in the layout. But the walls had already been painted a bright yellow. Maybe he'd done it a few days before his boxes arrived. That only raised more questions though. How had he not seen him then? His eyes trailed around the room. There were posters scattered all over the walls quite neatly. Poster tape tucked away in the shelf under the TV. Wow, that was a nice TV. The perfect kind for watching movies on the couch with. There was a small potted plant nestled in one of the corners. The thought of such a gruff person taking the time to care for and water the little plant was very endearing. He pushed the thought aside, though, as he took it all in. Bakugou's place was pretty cozy, but he honestly had yet to see him, which was a little odd. There was a stirring noise somewhere to the right of the room that suddenly caught his attention. Tearing his gaze away from the plasma screen, he turned to see Bakugou in the kitchen. The sound of a pot being opened as his feet moved around. Hey. The blonde acknowledged him from the kitchen, but made no move to leave the area and actually greet him. "Hey, didn't really see you there." He shifted his feet nervously at the doorway. Stepping further into the apartment, he decided to close the door. "So, you cooked?" That really threw him off. He didn't think Bakugou would be the type for cooking. That would take a lot of time and patience, especially if you don't want to burn the place down. And yet the man seemed to growl at the slightest move he made during the hospital ride. This seemed different though. If the food tasted as good as it smelled, then he was totally down for it. He supposed the other did mention being able to cook before though, but he genuinely thought he was bluffing or something. "I was actually gonna order some pizza, but we can do that next time then." For some reason he felt his heart race. Next time? He was already expecting him over again. Bakugou patted the table his pan was resting on. "I have too much ingredients, remember." "Right. Got you. Next time. I don't know, you can just sit down on the couch. I'll bring everything over soon." Midoriya took that moment to take off his shoes, neatly fixing them in the doorway. The shorter of the two headed towards the living room. From there he looked at the TV, some furniture commercial playing as people sang along. "Shit, actually, I have some CDs in the bottom cabinet. See if you can pick something out for us." He didn't need him to point where, his eyes landing on the shelf under the kitchen. "Roger that, Captain." He could feel Bakugou roll his eyes from here, if the heavy sound of a pot being placed on the stove didn't give him an idea. He chuckled and searched around for a movie. Old sports magazines and a few books were scattered around the shelf. He fingered the leaf of an old Percy Jackson book. The edges were a little bent, but in good enough condition. His eyes landed on something else. Let's see, Deadpool, Spider-Man, and Wonder Woman. More action flicks. Good stuff, good stuff. He audibly gasped as he saw a certain cover. "No way, you have Tangled?" Upon closer inspection he had a few other Disney movies. Some Studio Ghibli films were hiding at the very back. Bakugou made his way out the kitchen, 2 hot plates of food in either hand. A small frown was on his face, but it didn't seem as bad as the first time they met. "Yeah? So what?" "It's a good movie. That's one of my favorites." "Okay, we gotta watch this first, and then maybe one of these other ones. Or find something online, I guess." "I don't mind either way." He looked at Bakugou to see what he thought. The other nodded and carefully placed the plate of food next to him. "Try to not spill this one." His voice had a slightly amused tone to it though. Midoriya frowned. "Once. It happened once. I'm extra careful now. And I'm still really sorry about that." "Right? Good to know." Bakugou eyed him as he continued going through old CDs. "What do you want to drink?" "Anything is fine. It's really no problem." Bakugou merely hummed in reply, stalking off to his kitchen again to get them some drinks. Midoriya carefully set his plate aside to set up the movie, his final picks placed to the side from the rest of the bunch. The blonde came back shortly, sitting down on the couch and watching him organize. Midoriya found himself talking before he even realized, placing the rest of the films back on the shelf. "So, I gotta be honest here." He looked at the other over his shoulder. "I didn't actually think you were the cooking type. It really shocked me." For a moment, the smallest of smiles actually found its way to Bakugou's face. Midoriya also found himself smiling. Huh. It was good to know that his smile was nice after all. "My cooking skills are a plus, I'll have you know. If I make my own shit, I think it tastes better as all. You can only have processed garbage for so long or certain amounts of time." Midoriya's poor eating habits could attest to that. "It better be good." The blonde raised a brow, obviously surprised at the light teasing. He didn't seem opposed to it, though, as Midoriya finally stood up from organizing to sit next to him. "Just trust in my supreme skills, you damn nerd." Midoriya felt himself grinning, the insult obviously playful. "Okay, if your food is extremely good then, I owe you something. Free coffee excluded, that is. But if it sucks, then you owe me something." Bakugou calmly sipped his water. "You're setting yourself up to lose, you know." Midoriya quirked a brow at that spark of wanting a challenge already starting to ignite in him. He turned quietly to the screen as the opening scene started to roll. He'd see about that. Midoriya took his fork and prepared himself. He wasn't looking, but he could definitely feel Bakugou's eyes on him. Damn him, he'd win this, and make him buy him ice cream. 3 ice creams. The fancy kind on the more expensive waffle cones, and an extra bag of cherries. The dark-haired boy took one bite out of the meal before stopping. He blinked in surprise, mouth only moving again as he slowly kept chewing. How could something from someone like him, so loud and abrasive, taste so good? Holy fuck, this was amazing. Midoriya swallowed and shot a suspicious look at Bakugou, who was already watching him quite knowingly. He took back everything he said about liking his smile earlier. At least not under these circumstances. Well, when all else fails, you lie through your teeth. And that's exactly what Midoriya tried to do. Keyword being tried. You know, Bakugou, that's a real shame. I guess you lost, sorry. This doesn't taste good at all. Bullshit. He shook his head. I've tasted way better. Way better. His tone was unbelieving when he spoke next. So, you've obviously tasted better. Then why would you possibly eat more? WHFWA? You're literally putting more of it in your mouth as we speak. He was indeed stuffing another hefty spoonful into his mouth, cheeks bulging slightly in the cutest of ways. A few moments passed as they quietly looked at each other. Bakugou's growing smirk only made Midoriya raise his spoon again. More taste testing. He swallowed. Yikes. It's still bad, sorry, I don't make the rules. The other quirked a smug look in his direction, but decided to humor him anyway. As if he could ever make anything shitty though. All right, fine. What do I owe you, Freckles? Midoriya seemed to consider this for a while, his gaze landing on the movie playing on screen. This had surprisingly been nice so far. Decent even. They might have missed a lot of the opening scene because of their banter. It was mostly Midoriya being curious about the film, Bakugou heckling him for wanting so many details. But he had his attention on it all now. Another spoonful of rice ready and waiting to be eaten in his hand. He actually wouldn't mind doing something like this again. A thoughtful look set on his face, and absent-mindedly he chewed. Then swallowed. And finally he said, another hangout day. He found himself smiling a little as he looked at Bakugou. He was met with an unreadable look. Though he didn't have much time to question it as the blonde glanced away, his attention suddenly back on the movie. Midoriya hadn't missed the way the other shifted though, lips quirking slightly in a way that almost seemed like he wanted to smile. A telltale sign he'd later learn meant that the other was pleased, but not quite willing to show it. For now he had his sneaking suspicions, but the other hadn't kicked him out yet. He preferred to continue eating in silence, and Midoriya never realized he was still staring in thought at him. He got his answer then, the blonde's rolling his eyes at him, then turned his glare at the TV screen, as if to say, your company is fine. So just fucking watch this with me already, idiot. If you'd ask Midoriya to describe how he felt in that moment, he wouldn't really be sure what to tell you. Excitement. Happiness. A sense of something new and unfamiliar for sure, but definitely wanted. How else could he describe it? A warm feeling bubbled up in his chest, but it was gone as fast as it came. Feeling satisfied, he opted to pay attention, now gaze landing back to the screen. Mother Gothel was on screen, obviously getting ready to sing to a very frazzled-looking Rapunzel. He happily bit down another spoonful. Yes, he could get used to this. Monday mornings were the worst at work. Between working the morning shift on Monday and the afternoon shift on Friday, Midoriya liked Fridays a lot more. Fridays found him making sweet drinks for the younger crowd amongst polite conversations. People coming in to sit at a table with friends and talk or work on their laptops. It was the bustle of the beginning of a free weekend. Mondays were worse. People were of course tired and irritated, not eager in the slightest to get back to work from their relaxing weekends. They'd snap at the employees easier, urge them to hurry so they could get to work on time. He swore he'd shoot so many errand people sympathetic looks as they had to lug trays of coffee back to their superiors. Not to mention the entitled people they'd get if their bean water wasn't done to perfection. The thought left him shivering. It was a busy nightmare. But finally, there'd been a break of peace, enough for them to check their phones and talk for a little while. Kaminari groaned. He frowned next to Midoriya, his eyes looking over at the tables. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was serving a couple of college kids that wanted to grab a quick drink before their lectures. "Did you see IG get hit on by all those young business women earlier?" "Yeah," he supplied. "I saw you standing at the counter with him and glaring at them too." They somehow managed to ignore him regardless. All eyes focused on 𝗧𝗵𝗲's bright smile and wonderful muscles showing through his fitted uniform. Midoriya sat up a little. Wait, was 𝗧𝗵𝗲 just scouted as a potential sugar baby? Those women were well over his age range. "He's my bro B." "What is a bro B to do when your bro B is being hit on?" "If you say bro B one more time, I swear." They looked to see Ida stepping from the back room. Assistant manager badge proudly hung on his chest. He waved his hands in exasperation. "Okay, how about?" Kaminari looked to Ochako, who was idly wiping the counter, but listening in on the conversation anyway. Todoroki leaned on it next to her, sipping a can of apple juice. "Brie?" Ida shook his head. "We're ignoring the fact that Brie is a term for a hillside. Isn't that like a ship name for the Teens Titans characters or something?" They all looked at Ochako, minus Todoroki, who was giving Ida a look of fond pity. "The what now? Brie?" Kaminari bit his lips and thought. "Oh, Raven and Beast Boy. Huh." Todoroki went to throw his juice in the garbage. "That's Brie, you fools." Midoriya was in the middle of commenting on how he would know that, when 𝗧𝗵𝗲 seemed to make his way back behind the counter at that moment. He raised an eyebrow at them all, but didn't seem opposed to the conversation. "Why are we talking about Teen Titans?" "Bro B, you're back." Kaminari smiled. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 smiled and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. "I thought we agreed on B-bros?" "No, it's bros before hoes. But hoes being bees. So bro B." "Dude, you're right." Midoriya smiled fondly at the two and shook his head. They were quite a pair indeed. Luckily, the morning rush passed and died down as it always did. They had a bit of time on their hands until a major lunch flood came in, but for now Kaminari and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 were just about ready to take their break and eat somewhere together. Ida had gone back into the staff room to look over their finances, which left him with Ochako and Shoto. Their ears all peaked up at what 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had said shortly after. "So, how'd that whole hangout thing go with Ubokudo?" "Bakugou, bro," his boyfriend informed him. "Bakugou. Right." All eyes turned to look at Midoriya, smug grins and curious smiles all around. He gulped. Never has he wished to disappear more than ever. "It was fine. We watched a few movies, good and bad. Roasted the really shitty ones, though that was mostly him." He scratched his cheek. "And ate?" Ochako furrowed her brows in confusion. "Why'd you say that last part questionably? Did y'all eat or not?" "Yes, there was eating," he coughed. "He was a surprisingly good cook." "He cooks?" Todoroki was astonished. "Someone like him?" He couldn't believe it. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 grinned and patted him on the back. "Good for you, man. Glad your date didn't fall through." "It wasn't a date." "Right." Ochako nodded. "And 𝗧𝗵𝗲 doesn't have abs." The boy clutched his own stomach in mock disbelief. It was then that he realized how silly he looked and decided to check his phone. Midoriya groaned. "Okay, maybe it was, but just by a little. It was surprisingly decent. We might hang out again. But I'm not expecting anything from this. I still feel awkward about that whole coffee mess from before, though." Midoriya saw Kaminari's smile fall as his eyes looked behind him. Then it turned into a snicker. He didn't pay much mind to it, as he continued to ramble about their time together. It wasn't until he heard someone clear their throat did he jump and stop talking. "Oh no." He looked at Todoroki, and Todoroki silently nodded, moving his gaze to look behind him. Midoriya slowly turned to look too, and felt his face turning red. Bakugou was standing behind him, arms propped on the counter as he leaned forward. How long was he there? He was going to absolutely destroy his friends later. Midoriya stuttered and cleared his throat. "Hiya, Bakugou." "Hi." They stared at each other. "So about my badass amazing food skills and rippling muscles." Midoriya straightened up. "I never said that." "Interesting. Just like I never heard you belt out the lyrics to I've Got a Dream yesterday." "It's a good song," he said defensively. "Why are you here, by the way?" "My free cup of coffee, remember." "Noted." right? The coffee? Just the coffee. He wanted the freebie. Maybe he was frowning a little. Whatever. Midoriya quickly turned to go make his order. You don't need a couple people to make 1 cup after all. And my discount on the sweets. He lightly reminded him from over the counter. Don't you dare forget. Kirishima noted with mild amusement that he wasn't staring at the dessert display though, but instead at Midoriya, who was tending to the coffee machine. He was biting his lip as he carefully focused on the cup in front of him, pressing the necessary buttons as he waited. Ochako whispered to Todoroki. You know, I never got to see him since I was out last week. I expected something slightly different. Same. Todoroki had only seen that small glimpse of him kneeling on their floor last week spouting curses. He didn't see any sign of him when he went to visit Izuku's apartment though. The person in front of him was still very mean looking, but not as shouty as then. He hummed. A case of resting bitch face perhaps? Bakugou had ended up staying by the counter even after he got his coffee and sweets, which was given to him very carefully this time, thank you very much, watching Midoriya work in silence as he chewed his cookies. Ochako vaguely wished he'd just sit down at a table instead of staying at the counter, but she bit her tongue for Midoriya's sake, instead shooting him a dirty look. Bakugou was too focused to notice anyway. After he was done, he left his cup on the counter, dusting off his hands and leaving without looking back. A real charmer. Todoroki whispered dryly. Ochako frowned at him. Are you sure about this? He's actually kinda cool, Kirishima said. There's this I don't care kind of manliness to him on the outside. What about the inside? He wondered to himself. His musings were interrupted by the boy next to him. Shoot, wait, we forgot to give him our info again, IG. He turned to look at his boyfriend. Oh shit, you're right. Why would he need your info, Todoroki Keisaton? We're gonna friend him up friendship, whether he likes it or not. Kirishima smiled much to Todoroki's bemusement. Can you believe this? Izuku. Midoriya was pretty quiet, taking the cup and throwing it away. He stood by the counter in silence for a while, phone in hand. Hey Izuku. Ochako went to tap his shoulder. You all right? He buried his face in his hands and slid down to the ground behind the counter. Everyone ran over to him in worry. Izuku? Todoroki looked at his phone lying on the ground next to him. The recent text messages were open to someone nicknamed Angry. Angry? Good coffee. Was all right. Angry. You actually look kinda cute when focused on work and angry. Wait, God f king shit. I didn't mean to press 𝗓𝗏. Angry. Ignore that, or I'll kill you, I swear. We will not fucking watch Black Mirror together, I swear on my lifeblood. I know where you live. Another message had pinged in, just as ridiculously threatening as the last, but held no real malice to it. Todoroki snorted humorlessly. Oh yeah, this guy was definitely classy. Oh. The blonde stopped walking when he heard a familiar voice call to him. Bakugou, he turned to see Midoriya, the boy wearing a light jacket over his clothes. It was getting just a little colder at this time of year, but not to the point of freezing. Evenings in general were a little chilly, so he wasn't all that surprised. They were both on opposite sides of the street. Bakugou on his way back to his apartment after a light afternoon jog at the park in Midoriya, doing whatever it is that he was doing. He was about to plug his headphones in when he heard the other boy call to him. With interest slightly piqued, he raised a brow. Midoriya quickly checked both sides of the road like the law-abiding citizen that he was before lightly jogging to catch up to Bakugou. Hey, are you on your way somewhere? He greeted. Bakugou shifted to properly look at him. Was just heading home. Why? I was on my way to the grocery store to get some stuff and prepare. Prepare for what? Well, Halloween's coming up, you know. On that day, all my friends have this big Halloween party kind of thing at Momo's house. He backtracked, realizing the other didn't know her. Momo is our really rich friend, by the way. I guess that's a little blunt, but it's also kind of endearing when applied to her. But she's a nice girl. Anyway, he shook his head. She hosts it with her girlfriends. People dress up, get free food and talk. Since we're at like friend tier 2 as the squad credit to Kaminari, we get to help them set up decorations and whatnot before the actual party. I'm in charge of spooky stuff this time, like pumpkins. Candy corn? Bakugou shook his head in disbelief. Fucking pumpkins. He obviously didn't know shit about being scary. What you need for your thing is a ton of fake webs. Or real webs. I know a guy. Oh. He shifted nervously. I also kinda need some basic household groceries for myself too at the moment. I'm not sure if I can carry everything on my own though. He let his words hang in the air, looking up at Bakugou in fake innocence. He wasn't buying that though, face very unamused. Cut the cute act. What? Me? He paused. Wait. He thought he was cute? Before Midoriya could really dwell on the thought of it, the other's voice quickly cut through his musings. Look, if you need help, just fucking ask from the get-go. He started pushing him in the direction Midoriya was heading to before a hand tapped the blonde's arm. Wrong way, Bakugou. He started pushing him in the right direction they needed to go in. Shut up. He huffed. Let's buy all your spooky shit. Why do you keep saying your? Midoriya questioned. Bakugou stopped walking, and by extension Midoriya also came to a halt. You're as grammatically correct, you idiot. Midoriya opted to ignore the insult and continued on. No, I mean, you know you're invited to come too, right? He coughed. That is if you want. We could maybe go together. Or you could help decorate with everyone too. So. You inclusive us. There was a curious look on his face for a few seconds. But his face soon turned into that default frown of his Midoriya was starting to recognize. Whatever. Let's go already before everything closes down. He thought that Bakugou was annoyed with him, or might have brushed it off as not that important. After all, he hadn't known him for too long. But that seemed to be how he decided to respond to most things. But when he turned to look up at him, he could see a very small smile on his face, albeit he was looking anywhere that wasn't at him. He had been unsure about the other thus far, but he seemed to be okay with him right now at least. Midoriya felt the corners of his lips tug up in response. They continued their trek to the store, barely managing to catch it on time as it was closing soon. He felt bad about being that asshole customer trademark that came in to shop last minute, but regardless, Bakugou seemed unbothered as he entered. They managed to get several things stockpiled like fake skeletons, pumpkins that Midoriya still insisted on, 2 really cringy but oddly cool framed holographic photos where it looks normal until you move to show a gorier version of the photo, fake tombstones, candles for dramatic effect, bats and fake blood that Bakugou insisted would liven up the place. After debating in the candy aisle on whether to get black licorice as something spooky for 10 minutes straight, the manager was losing patience. After hovering nearby for a while, he checked his watch and hurriedly ushered them to buy what they need and get out the store. They left 5 minutes past closing time, an apology leaving Midoriya's lips in embarrassment. If the two had sticked around for a minute longer, they would have seen the manager shake his head, muttering to himself about the disrespect of younger couples of this new generation. They got the licorice after all, Bakugou carrying most of the bags with ease as they made their way to the grocery store together. Maybe they could use them for dares or something. After a few brief jokes of Midoriya buying ingredients to lure Bakugou over to his place to cook his world-class food, the blonde clicked his tongue in mild annoyance. Tonight happened to be squad night after all. He'd need to get his house ready to host his friends. Kaminari hopefully wouldn't break his action figures this time. Bakugou and Midoriya parted ways at his apartment, a promise to have him over soon to actually cook something for him. Somehow the promise felt warm. He couldn't wait. A sudden wave of utter mortification ran through his body as he sat up in bed, clutching his pillow harshly. I think I might like him, he whispered to himself. Izuku, it's 3 a.m. I'm so. Before he could apologize, he felt a pillow get slammed in his face. Midoriya sputtered and fell back on his bed. An oof could be heard somewhere beneath him from the person he'd fallen on. He winced. Tonight was one of those nights where Midoriya's crew were able to line up all their schedules for once. Thus the alleged hero squad sleepover, as Kaminari had called it, commenced that very Saturday night. Kaminari seemed to take liberty of naming a lot of things for some reason. They were all bundled up in his bedroom. Others camped out on the floor in a mess of blankets, while those who got to the bed first stayed there. The couches in his small living room were perfectly empty and usable, but everyone preferred to pile together in one room. Midoriya passed out shortly after the 3-movie mark, exactly 4 slices of pizza and a deadly battle of Mario Kart with Kirishima, Tsuyu, and Ochako. Damn that Asui. She was really good at driving Yoshi. Thoughts of hanging out with Bakugou earlier had popped back into his head during his dreams. The dream then going into dangerous territory. He was suddenly awake before he even knew what hit him, heart pounding fast in his chest as he tried to calm down. He looked to see he'd fallen back onto Ida, laughing nervously as he sat up again, patting his arms in apology. Ida squinted bemusedly at him, reaching over to the bedside counter to find his glasses. He stumbled for a while in the dark until he seemed to find them, quickly putting them. I don't appreciate being woken up like this. Ida's expression turned more into that of concern. Are you all right, though? Midoriya smiled. Yeah, I'm all right. He sat up a little straighter. More importantly, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲. He heard a yawn to his left from the mattress on the floor. Kaminari did it. Ah, Kirishima. I would never. Huh. So where's your pillow, darling? Why, honey, I thought we were sharing yours. 𝗎𝙢𝙢𝙢𝗢 groaned, her efforts of trying to stay asleep ruined as she turned on her phone light. That's gay. Why, thank you. Kaminari winced as her phone light shone directly in his face. He held his hands up in surrender. They all heard Midoriya snort. Wait, where's Tsuyu? Oh, she's right here, 𝗎𝙢𝙢𝙢𝗢 grinned. She lifted up her covers to reveal her girlfriend, who was passed out and snuggled up to her side, sleeping quite peacefully. Heavy sleeper as always, huh? They all smiled to themselves and quieted down, doing their best not to bother her. 𝗎𝙢𝙢𝙢𝙢 turned her flash off, deciding to go back to bed as she carefully laid back down. She made sure to be extra quiet as she got comfortable again. Kirishima took this time to shift closer to Midoriya, his voice a little softer this time. So why'd you wake up so suddenly, man? Eyes not a little more adjusted to the dark, he could see the redhead looking at him curiously. I heard something about crushes. Midoriya choked as quietly as one could when put on the spot in the early morning. When did he know? Is it that coffee dude? Bakugou, right? Midoriya only felt his stomach churn when he looked at Kaminari to confirm. He heard him hum in affirmation. Ida groaned. He keeps visiting the shop, and when he sees you aren't there, he just walks back out. He never returns my good afternoons or good evenings, and he won't buy anything. They could hear the frown evident in his voice. The feeling of the bed moving slightly meant he was waving his arms in frustration, as he usually did. I don't like his attitude. He might come around. You gotta put more chocolate stuff on display. Last time I checked he liked those. Oh ho ho. You already know what he prefers now. They could hear the smile in Kirishima's voice. They heard a yawn from the other side of the room. Todoroki stretched and rubbed at his eyes. He shifted to look at the crew, many sets of eyes blinking at him. How he stayed asleep this long no one knew. Let me guess. He tiredly said Izuku's is having some sort of gay crisis. Yeah, he is actually. Dude, how'd you know? I am not. He curtly cut in. Midoriya groaned. I just want to get back to sleep. Izuku, just let things work out on their own like I told you. I'm pretty sure it's all gonna be alright. Yeah, same. Ochako said. I agree with Todoroki. Midoriya's head whipped around to look at her. He thought she went back to bed. She seemed to sense what he was thinking and quietly supplied. I'm nosy. Midoriya was unamused by this point. However, they all looked at Todoroki again in question. It's a shame Izuku's gonna leave us. You know how couples can get. I'm doing what? It's his muscles, isn't it, Izuku? Ochako, no. We should all get muscles. Kirishima supplied. He looked down at his body. Bigger muscles. Uda scoffed. You guys sound ridiculous. Izuku Protection Squad is a 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏 with a program. I was always a part of that squad. Midoriya actually laughed at that. Forgetting about Asui for a moment, he really couldn't stop smiling. I love you guys. Wow, that's gay. Despite Todoroki's words, he saw him come closer for a hug. Everyone else following to give him a hug. They stilled as they heard another voice speak up. If Izuku is done talking about his future boyfriend, can we all go back to sleep? Asui said from her spot next to Ochako. Oh. Whoops. Or, Kaminari said. We don't go back to sleep now that everyone's awake. We all have some nice cold cereal at 3 and while watching something on Netflix. That actually sounds really good. Here we go then. Midoriya watched as Kaminari and Kirishima raced to the kitchen, getting up to follow them shortly after in the hopes that they didn't make a mess. Their fridge privileges already got revoked once. He really didn't need that to happen again. Midoriya found himself at Bakugou's apartment again a few days later. The two were resting quite comfortably on his couch. The television was playing some new fast food commercial, the jingle threatening to get stuck in his head briefly before Bakugou switched the channel. He turned to look at him for a moment, his mind already running off the rails. Sure, they've already hung out a few times, but other than movies, his temper, and knowing he was a cook, there still wasn't too much Midoriya knew about the blonde. He felt an idea forming in his head as he continued to look at him. Shifting in his spot on the couch, Midoriya fully turned to him, garnering his attention briefly. So how's about this? He paused, green eyes meeting light brown eyes. The lighting of the room almost made them seem red, or a slight tinge of burgundy rather. 20 questions. Immediately the blonde's expression fell. Nope. Aw, come on, Bakugou. It'll be fun. Midoriya bit his lips in consideration. 15 questions then. No deal. 10 questions. Midoriya hummed thoughtfully. 10 questions and I buy you an ice cream? Bakugou raised an eyebrow at him, interest peaked again. A whole tub of ice cream, and not just the cone? Yes. What if it's disgusting, like mint? You take that back right now, mint is a damn delight. Guess the deal is off then. He stretched carefreely and plopped his feet up on the table. Midoriya wrinkled his nose. He'd have half a mind to tell him to take them down, but it was his table in his apartment after all. His feet were blocking the TV though. He ignored the urge to push them down. The blonde already seemed to have a bit of an attitude problem, and he'd rather he be snarky and calm than when he got irritated and grouchy. Midoriya frowned slightly and sighed for a very long time to show his displeasure. Finn. Mint ice cream, whatever, anything you want. You could buy grape-flavored ice cream for all I care. Bakugou actually paused his channel surfing then, somewhat of a bewildered look on his face. Geez, even then he still had a bit of glower. He looked at Midoriya. Do they actually have that shit? I don't know and never want to know. Okay, what if I want a cone after all? Bakugou's tone sounded teasing almost, but there was a sneer to it. What if I get one single cone, but I keep asking M to stack flavors on that one cone? Scoop after scoop. Would you still buy it for me? He was thoroughly enjoying annoying the other, a small but smug smile on his face. Midoriya looked at him in disapproval. Well, he wouldn't be the one that had to eat it all. Shrugging, Bakugou leaned over towards the table and reached for his drink. He watched him take an agonizingly long sip before he collapsed backwards on the couch. With Midoriya's tolerance meter slowly dwindling, he spoke. Let's just do this then, yeah? He cleared his throat. I guess I'll start. A watchful eye stayed on Bakugou. It was then that he realized he wasn't exactly sure what to ask him and froze. He had nothing. Maybe he should start off with the basics. A simple question came to mind. Favorite color? Red. Bakugou easily answered. Favorite food, I guess? All food. Except okay, I got a next question. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay? Yay. He stared straight-faced as Midoriya grimaced. You've ruined this whole friendship. Pineapple on pizza is a fucking classic, okay. He wildly waved his arms before crossing them. Where's your sense of taste? Do you not love yourself? Midoriya couldn't help but laugh at that. Why was he getting so heated about fruit on pizza? God, I'll let the pizza thing slide then. For now, next question. Bakugou sized him up. Do you cook? Nah, I'm not that good at it. The blonde had a look on his face that said he thought so. He ought to feel offended, but what else could one do about it? I burned down my mom's kitchen once when I was 12. She never let me back in the kitchen, unless it was to help her with dinner under her supervision. Oh. At the mention of Midoriya's family, he uncrossed his arms. What's she like? My mom? He saw him nod a little. It was Midoriya's turn to smile teasingly. Can't tell you. You used your turn already. He laughed as Bakugou scowled. How did you learn how to cook so well? He saw Bakugou reach up to scratch his head. He was looking down at his hands now instead of Midoriya. Just my mom. She taught me lots of shit. Plus, she owned a little restaurant, so it was only natural I had to work there, you know. That explains a lot, actually. Wow, that's pretty cool. The blonde smiled slightly, as if he was remembering something. Yeah, she's the coolest. His smile fell as he looked at Midoriya again though. Speaking of cool. Why are you always with that stupid half and half dude? Half and half. He frowned in confusion. It only took him a few seconds to piece it all together. Oh, you mean Todoroki? He's not stupid. That was 2 questions, by the way, he curtly said. And you still haven't answered mine. Midoriya's frown only grew. There was a sinking feeling in his stomach as he sat next to the other. Bakugou seemed very miffed, the mood starting to feel a little sour. Midoriya carefully continued talking. Todoroki is a close friend of mine. In fact, he's my best friend. And he happens to be one of my firsts since I moved into my apartment. He wasn't sure if the blonde was talking any of this in at the point as he continued. Why'd you move? College and life stuff. He shifted. Can't stay home forever. Bakugou hummed. Izuku idly watching him drum his fingers against the side of the couch. His hand stopped. Why do you work at the coffee place? It's fun, pays okay, and I met all my friends through it. Bakugou snorted. I'm surprised you're still working there if you can fumble around on the job so much. Midoriya stilled and looked at Bakugou nervously. I guess I do try my hardest though. My burn hasn't healed yet, by the way. Still left a big mark on the surface. He patted his chest and part of his stomach. Midoriya winced. He brought that up rather suddenly. The air felt tense and rigid. Midoriya felt awkward in his spot on the couch as he tried to think of how to say his next words. Once again, I'm still really sorry about that. I can get you some topical cream if you like. Midoriya felt his heart sink. Right. This whole thing was only possible because he casually burnt one of his customers. A wave of guilt swept over him as he saw Bakugou feeling his chest idly. It would probably be rude to ask to see. There wasn't supposed to be any lasting damage from what he remembered the doctor saying. But for some reason, there was still this small voice at the back of his head, telling him that he probably did a lot worse. It's whatever. Bakugou's voice has a little more back to it now. The tone I wasn't the one that so stupidly spilled coffee over someone. The two stilled as they looked at each other, an expression of hurt on Midoriya's face as the blonde looked at him. It was only then that the blonde seemed to realize he was probably drenching salt in an open wound. Bakugou wanted to shut himself up. What in the absolute fuck was he saying? Every time he opened up his stupid mouth, he made things worse. He always messed things up, it seemed, and his social life definitely seemed to show it. But the other couldn't possibly know that. And there was no reason for him to suddenly get so agitated. He wanted to stop talking, but there was just something about having the other next to him, and suddenly he felt like he didn't quite deserve to be around him. Because he's too good. He's too nice. And good things never seem to stay in his life for long. Obviously, this stupidly warrants him making his doubts into reality. Or maybe, just maybe, he was also too prideful to realize his own jealousy. He felt his jaw clench tightly. And I said, I'm sorry. I can't turn back time and stop myself from spilling it. What more can I do for you, Bakugou? My company already gave you the free cup and the discount is. Do you just want something else from me? Is that what all this is about? Bakugou folded his arms. As if Midoriya was actually okay to be around Fat Chance. He'd ever say that out loud. But right now, something about it all had him frowning. He felt his throat tighten then. The words he wanted to say refused to come out properly, getting twisted somewhere along the way and making his stomach feel bad. He really wanted to kick himself in the head sometimes. Yeah, well, who would want to be around a klutz like you anyway? Huh? Shut up. Midoriya sat up in agitation. I don't even know why I put up with you. You're always so rude. His arms waved around wildly as he spoke. When I think you're finally decent, you go and act like this, insulting my closest friend and me. You don't have to fucking be around me if that's the case then. God knows no one else wants to. Someone shut him up. He felt his shoulders tensing up with every movement, face now set in a hard and angry frown. Who the fuck are you to call me out anyway? You don't know a goddamn thing about me. Midoriya slowly inhaled and released a shaky breath, the last of his patience wearing thin. Yeah, he didn't know anything about him. But he was trying, wasn't he? He had hoped that he got that across to him. But that didn't seem to be the case. God. What was the point of all this then? Midoriya was rightfully pissed off now, frustration and confusion mixing all together in a tangled pot of irritation. Can you, I don't know, stop being the worst person on the planet for 1 minute and think about what I'm trying to do? That made the blonde actually pause for a moment and stop to look at him. He stayed silent for a very long while, long enough to make Midoriya's anger head honest to goodness start to fizzle out mostly into confusion. Midoriya sighed deeply and stood up, the couch dipping more to where Bakugou was seated. It had barely been an hour, but he was already drained, both physically and emotionally. The conversation had somehow become a lengthy chain of strained mess. If he stayed any longer, he'd definitely get a headache or risk the neighbors coming over due to the yelling. He'd rather not put the old landlord through that. Standing up, he tiredly looked at his phone. Sorry. I think I'm gonna call it a night. Thanks for having me over. I guess seemed to linger in the air afterwards. He hurriedly went to grab his shoes, not even bothering to put them on. With that he left, shutting the door roughly behind him, and walking down the hall to unlock his own doors. So maybe Bakugou fucked up a little. No, they both kind of fucked up is what. He sat on his couch alone in silence for what seemed like a long time, bitter at himself and bitter at Midoriya for leaving, despite him being the one to stir shit. Bakugou's pride still held rein on him, as he told himself he was in the right. No more like he convinced himself he was in the right. But deep down he knew that he'd been an asshole. His brain preferred to tell him that it was at Midoriya's fault in the first place. His fault for bothering to befriend someone like him. He slowly stalked towards his room, and just when he thought things were going good. That night Midoriya fell face first onto his bed, and laid there in silence, the sheets falling to his sides dully. And he stayed there, silently fuming over everything and nothing. He wasn't sure how much time had passed honestly. Before he knew it, the night had given way to morning, and he was still in bed. Yet, despite all the time that passed, his anger had not subsided even a little. Every time the incident came up in his mind, he felt livid all over again. He was still in that stage of being so angry and bitter that all logic got overridden by the will to stay and stew in his emotions. What kind nonsense was Bakugou on about, seriously? Was he really expecting something else from him? And here he thought they could have been good friends. Maybe even a little more if it came to that. But now, he was rightfully pissed. It's like his brain went on bad mode and his mouth didn't have a filter. Midoriya inhaled sharply and closed his eyes. He should probably get up and shower at some point maybe. After apparently refusing to read his texts and answer his phone, Todoroki had come over unannounced. He barely moved when his bedroom door opened, though he felt his face change a little at hearing his friend in the doorway. Thoughts of what the blonde had said about him only started to make him feel sour again. He tried to burrow himself further into the blankets, which was honestly impossible at this point. But damn if he wouldn't try. How did you get in? His muffled voice said somewhere under all the protection. Todoroki came in the room to see Midoriya under a thick pile of blankets. Peeking under the fabric, he saw the boy playing his Nintendo 3DS, a large bag of chips piled next to him from the day before, and a pretty empty water bottle. Have you been so hung up crushing on Spiky Boy that you've already forgotten one of your best friends has a spare key? Todoroki rubbed his head and sighed. I really have been forsaken. Midoriya grumbled and grabbed at the sheet to pull it back down. Leave me alone, 𝗧𝗪𝗧𝗏. Todoroki pulled it back up. No, I don't mean to be that type of guy, but you never miss all my texts and calls. He sat down on the bed next to his friend. Are you okay? No. He saved his game and rested it on the bed. His mayoral duties in his Animal Crossing town could wait, fishing and virtual socializing aside. Maybe. I'm still a little miffed is all. Why? Todoroki climbed further onto his bed and went under the makeshift blanket nest with him. He casually kicked the leftover garbage off the bed. They could pick that up later. Todoroki eyed his friend in concern, studying his face carefully in the dim lighting. Wait, did something actually happen? He felt his face turn dark. Was it really something with that guy? What did he do to you? I can sort this out right now just like that. He started to get up when Midoriya grabbed his pant leg. Todoroki in an awkward half-step off of the bed. Todoroki furrowed his brows in mild annoyance as he looked at his friend. No, please don't even waste your time. Honestly, it's nothing serious. He lightly breathed. Not even worth it. Todoroki felt the hold on his leg loosened, and he found himself biting his cheek in consideration. He considered Midoriya's face for a few tentative seconds. Then just tell me. Midoriya frowned. He finally gave in with a small sigh. Fine. We both may have said some things to each other. It got just a little out of hand. He looked up at the other. He started at first though. He called you and your hair stupid, which would be another thing if you guys were friends, and did the whole casual insult thing. But he doesn't even know you. And then he insulted me and turned into the biggest asshole. So I just couldn't deal with that and got mad. Midoriya slowly inhaled, and after calming himself a little he exhaled. I thought we were finally getting somewhere, 𝗧𝗵𝗲. Then the conversation got really heated. I'd rather not see or hear about him for a bit. Maybe forever. That could work, right? Todoroki stayed quiet and watched his face for a while, searching for something. And suddenly he got his answer. He nodded before pulling the blankets up off his friend. All right, enough with the moping then. Come on, let's marathon some movies, okay? Todoroki left no room for arguing in his voice as he got Midoriya's laptop off the counter. He ignored the offended look thrown his way and maneuvered around the room as he grabbed Midoriya's game, gingerly placing it on his bedside table. I'll make you some tea and buy you those cookies you like, all right? 𝗧𝗵𝗲. You're right. Some ice cream too. Lots of it. Your favorite flavor. I bet he who can't be named doesn't even know that. The absolute bare minimum. Midoriya decided to keep quiet that he almost knew, but decided that wouldn't matter much to his companion. He'll be our new Voldemort or something. He looked at Midoriya then, a slightly unimpressed look on the other's face. Oh right. No mentioning him. That's not what I meant, but okay. Midoriya saw him heading towards the door and called out to him one last time. Thank you. For this. The whole ordeal is probably pretty silly in hindsight. Todoroki smiled and shook his head. If I don't make you happy, then what's the point of being friends? I learned that it's always good to have someone bring value to your life. You do that for me. If I can return it at any given chance, I will. Todoroki ruffled his hair, once again ignoring the noise of indignation that came from the other, and made his way out of his room. If he had looked back, then he would have seen the other's small expression of fondness. But he was already stepping into the apartment's halls. He closed the front door and locked it, giving it a slight twist to make sure that it was indeed locked. Pausing for a while, he stared at Midoriya's door in thoughtful silence. He looked around at the empty hallway around him and made up his mind. Instead of heading out to the store, he went in the opposite direction, heavy footsteps leading himself further and further down the hall until they stopped directly at Bakugou's door. With a few quick knocks he waited, hands coolly resting in his pockets and face fixed sharply. It didn't take too long for a response. He heard the sound of loud steps getting closer to the door, the metal of the locks twisting against wood before the door was quickly flung open. What? Bakugou took a moment to see who was actually in front of him before the scowl on his face deepened into a glare. It was clear on his face that the last person he wanted to see was him, face seeming to say, "Why are you here?" As he straightened up. "You. The fuck do you want?" Todoroki's nose scrunched in annoyance. Shifting the weight of his leg to the next, he blankly looked at the blonde. His words were low and cold, the casual concerned tone he had with Midoriya before now gone as his gaze set on the man in front of him. Don't get me wrong. With small, calm movements he tilted his head. I'm not here because I want to be. I feel like this is something that needed to be necessary. Izuku didn't send me either, if that's what you're thinking. He's a stubborn one. Careful eyes watched Bakugou's hand place itself on the doorframe, his posture becoming a little more balanced. Once again. What the fuck do you want then? I'm just about ready to close this door. Todoroki's mouth set into a very thin line, his calm demeanor dwindling fast. I'll make this very quick for both our sakes then. Todoroki stepped closer to the other, an air of malice looming over him as he stood face to face with him. Bakugou's hard glare didn't subside in the slightest, either as he met him head-on, his on stare running hot, standing a little straighter to watch him quietly. Both of them stood their ground as he continued. If you dare hurt my friend again, I will personally come after you myself. Not with a calm talk. Not with yelling or irrelevant threats stockpiled up to Mount Everest. No, I can do a lot worse, because I can. And I will wholeheartedly ensure that you're moved out of this complex one way or another. With less than you came with. That is if you don't sack up. He heard Bakugou scoff. As if I'd leave just because you said so. I pay my money here, I keep my stuff here. It's my property. Bakugou squared his jaw. Who are you to tell me this shit anyway? He spat out, almost daring the other to come closer. Todoroki felt his eye twitch. What does he see in you anyway? You're just some guy trying to keep this calm and collected front up, but you're probably really shitty under all that. Like I fucking said, and for the last time get it through your thick skull, he's my best friend and only my best friend. Don't I have the right to care about him and make sure he's okay? That he's not out there getting interested in the wrong set of people. He pointedly frowned at the blonde. You're being really childish, Bakugou. You even more bullheaded than he is on a bad day. And you obviously have some really weird ego about all this in your head. You have a massive attitude problem, and from what I can tell you have a listening problem as well. Maybe you need to really take a moment and just stop and think about what I'm saying here. Oh no, Bakugou had heard him just fine. Admitting he was in the wrong was obviously just too hard for him to say. I don't need to listen to someone like you. I'll do shit on my own time at my own pace. Don't test me, damn it. Look. He finally retracted himself from Bakugou's doorway. I'd do anything to make sure my best friend is happy, all right. And if you keep up this, I don't even know what to call it, I'll come back here and flat out knock some common sense into you. You aren't going to fix anything this way. At all. Bakugou watched as he put both his hands back in his pocket, already turning to leave. Todoroki had someone to look after, and he would probably be wondering why he wasn't back by now. He addressed him one last time before Bakugou was about to close his door. Just get your shit together, all right? He didn't wait for an answer as his walk slowly turned into a light jog, Bakugou watching him head towards the stairs. His face morphed in something akin to irritation. With a deep and long frustrated sigh, he closed his door harshly. There was the sound of his footsteps retreating further into the room again, the quick static of the TV being turned off as he fell back on his bed in irritation. He didn't need someone else to tell him how he was fucking up his relationships. That only set to grind his gears even more than before. But he already resolved to himself, and long before that bastard came over, he'd fix this. He could. That's what he kept telling himself as he started to angrily doze off. It was a Sunday, the days passing idly by as Midoriya stewed around in his emotions. He was at the library with Ochako, the two wandering around the so-called manga section. She'd suddenly called him up, much to his suspicion, still not quite sure if Todoroki had mentioned to her in passing that he was feeling down. But he was happy to have some time to hang out with a friend. This section of their school's library didn't have much to offer in terms of good reads, most of the comics being older and donated. The old school romances seemed to outnumber any other genres greatly. Midoriya had hoped to find a nice shounen manga to kill some time, but so far all he was met with were pretty simple superhero comics. When it finally seemed like he found something interesting, he felt his shoulders droop. Leafing through the pages only proved to be dull. He heard Ochako sigh to his right, turning to raise an eyebrow at her in silent question. I'm 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗏. He snorted as he fully got a look at her, a book resting on top of her head leaning on a bookshelf. Stop that, you're gonna get us kicked out or something if the librarian passes by. She took the book off her head with a frown. You know, I honestly don't mind books and stuff, but it doesn't feel right today. Then why'd you ask me to come with you? She gasped loudly, Midoriya flinching and looking around frantically. There were some people a few shelves over who turned to look at them. Midoriya shushed her, and returned his book to its spot on the shelf. You never even said why. We went straight to this section after leaving the non-fiction stuff. I suddenly remembered. I wanted to find something for Tsuyu. He saw her smile turn into something akin to fondness. Right. Her girlfriend. He felt a pang of jealousy reign in his heart for a moment. The thought of him also being with someone at some point. But that obviously wasn't going to happen anytime soon. He needed to distract himself again from he, who must not be named. You only remember this now? He considered the shelves around them. What are we looking for exactly? Ooh. She tapped her finger on her cheek thoughtfully. Animal stuff? Ochako looked around and started to head out of the aisle. Midoriya followed her as she sped up, glancing through different rows and looking for something. She loves frogs, remember? Midoriya opened his mouth to say something when Ochako stopped him. And before you even say it, she's not a furry. I've heard that way too many times from Denki. He rolled his eyes, his joke being abruptly stopped. Asui was a good friend of his anyway. He was sure she would find it at the least amusing. Asui found frogs to be cute for some reason. But people like what they like. Ochako had even thrown around the idea in passing of wanting to get her a pet for Christmas, despite her being afraid of the things. Shouldn't we try to find the animal section first instead of looking for just frog-themed things? She stopped in her tracks, Izuku nearly bumping into her. You might be right. Okay, let's backtrack. Making a quick turnaround, she made a beeline to look at the signs for each section. Midoriya slowly trailing behind with a sigh. He swore they passed some of the same aisles a good 3 times, one of the librarian's watchful eyes following them in distrust. It didn't help that Uraraka ran through a few aisles after finally finding the right section, Midoriya urging her to slow her roll. That was when he happened to see a book on cats and got distracted. There was always time for cats. He was sure Ochako would be fine. 5 minutes later, Ochako found him again, a few fairly thick books in her hand. Except for a really thin book called The Adventures of Frog and Toad. He deadpanned, squinting at the offending book. Midoriya was like 90% sure that was a children's book, but who was he to stop her? I can buy these, right? Midoriya seemed to choke on his breath, using all of his willpower to put the cat book down and look at his friend. How often do you go to the library? No, listen, I did some research. If the books are old enough, or if you talk to the librarians, they might sell them to you, I think. She looked pretty determined. Very few could resist her when she was all hyped up like this, and boy did she know it. Midoriya shook his head fondly. Good luck convincing them. Smiling, he motioned to the exit. I'll be outside then. Text me if you need me to come back in. Maybe they could stop for some frozen yogurt on the way back or something. He was a little tired of coffee currently. K. With that, she headed in the direction she came from, more than likely off to find one of the librarians. Hopefully not the one that looked like she wanted to kick them out earlier. Midoriya had been standing near the entrance for several minutes when he felt his phone vibrating. Checking it really quickly, Todoroki's nickname showed up. Todoroki. Hey, has Bakugou talked to you lately? Midoriya felt his brows twitch, taking a moment to reply. No. Why? It showed Todoroki was typing before it went away. A while passed before he typed again. Todoroki. Nothing, God, he's stubborn. Maybe he'll settle things soon? Oh, now that would take a miracle. That sounds like it'll take a while. What will? Midoriya jumped to see Ochako peering at his phone curiously. She tried to get closer to sneakily see before he quickly put it in his pocket. He didn't realize he said that out loud. Nothing at all. She squinted at him, knowing something was up, but decided to let it be. You got the books? She beamed, holding up a little bag to show him. Yeah, I hope she likes them. Midoriya saw her expression become softer, a love-struck smile on her face. He laughed and took the books from her to hold. I'm sure she will. She loves everything you get her. Come on, let's go grab something really quick. I need to cool down. Yogurt. See, this is why we're friends. You must secretly have mind-reading powers or something. He smiled as he heard her laugh. I'd prefer to fly if I ever got powers. Or be able to lift a ton of stuff. Then cleaning would be so much easier. Midoriya chuckled. I could imagine that. They made their way down the entrance steps, conversation flowing easily on the walk there. He'd message 𝗬𝗪 a little later. After parting ways with Ochako at the bus stop, he found himself heading towards the park. It was late afternoon, so the air was much crisper. The leaves were blowing softly in the wind as he walked by, and the sky was a nice mixture of oranges and yellows, some pinks peeking out from behind the clouds and casting a satisfying glow on the trees. Reaching a nice secluded bench, he sat down to watch the scenery for a while. There were people jogging in the distance, determined but tired steps carrying them further and further. The shout of a little girl calling after her dog excitedly as it raced to catch a frisbee. Others busy talking on the phone or listening to music passed him by, and others also like him were just sitting down to watch the people around them. He took a big breath of air, letting it flow through him, and gave himself a moment to relax. When several more minutes passed, he took his phone out of his pocket, opening up his last and most recent messages with Todoroki. "Hey, was out with Uraraka today. What were you talking about earlier? Also, I'm a little put off by this Bakugou thing BTW. I love you, but don't you think you're kind of pushing the topic a little? Not saying I'm mad at you though." He didn't get an immediate reply back, as one would expect, so he left his phone out on the table for a while. Resting his head on the hardwood table, he idly wondered if he should have gotten a snack before he sat down. Some hot chocolate and a donut would have been nice for a setting like this. A quiet evening out while he listened to music and cooled down. Yeah, maybe he should come out here more often. The sky was mostly a dark rusted orange by now, small hints of light bursting through behind the clouds. One picture wouldn't hurt. Almost as if on cue, that was when his phone decided to vibrate. Todoroki. Yeah, sorry about that. I just get really worried about you, that's understandable. He paused and quickly sent something right after. But I do think I can work things out myself. We're all adults here. Todoroki. You're right. He saw the signs of the other typing before it disappeared, the three bubbles showing up again after a few seemingly hesitant moments. Todoroki. Hey, is it okay if I admit something? Would you promise not to get mad? Sure. I'm all ears. I'll text Todoroki. So, I kinda. Maybe. Talk to Bakugou a bit. You what? Is that why you were messaging me about him today? Todoroki. Yeah, I'm sorry I went and talked to him, even when you said not to. My emotions got out of control. Which is just more reason for me to believe I'll just end up being like Dad lol, but more apt you. I acted out of line, and I'll try to watch myself more when it comes to this. Todoroki. These kinds of things goodness 𝗬𝗪, listen. You're nothing like your dad why you better. And though I am a little mad you didn't tell me about talking to him. I can forgive you since you realize what you did was a little over the top. But I do appreciate it in a way Todoroki. I'm glad to hear Todoroki. I admit I'm still wary of him. But I think I should be able to trust you with things like this. You are your own person after all, and as bro for life Kirishima out of the picture, I'll support your dating choices Well, alright. I'm glad we could at least talk about this. Though I do think you'll need to talk to Bakugou at some point Todoroki. Of course. Todoroki. And SRY to cut the convo short. But Ida just came home, and we're going to visit Mom at the hospital Todoroki. So I'll talk to you later. I'll send her my best wishes. Later 3 Todoroki. 3 Todoroki. Oh, and apt Bakugou. I think it'll end up fine. 𝗬𝗪? Todoroki hadn't replied after that, leaving him a little confused. Of course they'd be fine. Well, if they talked. He sighed. Who was he kidding? He pretty much just promised he'd help fix things. Though there wasn't really any fault on his end. That all really depended on Bakugou. Izuku looked at his phone and turned it off. Todoroki meant well. He was sure he really did. He had no idea what the two had even talked about. Whether Todoroki actually visited him in person or got his number somehow. But it was okay. Probably. Todoroki had apparently had a pretty rough life before they'd met. Being homeschooled right up until the very end with little chance at making friends his age. Only getting the freedom to go to college after his sister continuously begged his father by repping how smart he was. His father wasn't a kind man, he told him. In fact, the thought of him made angry, but also filled him with a sense of fear. He couldn't imagine what he must have gone through with a father that forced a marriage onto someone else, later abusing both his wife and his own child. He shivered. Luckily, his mom was doing better, but thinking on it now, he could sort of forgive Todoroki's actions. The thought of someone hurting his closest friend probably struck something within him. Maybe in that moment he saw a little bit of his father in Bakugou with his loud and angry tendencies. Of course, he was sure the blonde would never go that far. But he was just glad to see his friend was living a lot happier now. Midoriya sighed. He needed some food. When Midoriya got home later that night, the last thing he expected to see was Bakugou waiting by his door. He was sitting on the ground and eyeing his phone. He looked up at the sound of the elevator opening though. And here they were now, Midoriya mid-sip with his drink and Bakugou frowning at him. The frown was pretty much his normal face though. Midoriya cleared his throat. Bakugou. The blonde took the initiative to stand up then. He was in front of his door after all. Ah, shit. I hate. Midoriya finished his drink and threw it in a nearby trash can. Did you want to say something? Or can I get inside? He motioned to his door, cautiously getting closer, mostly to reach for the doorknob and run in case he needed to. Yay. He scratched his head in frustration, seeming to think over his words before finally spitting them out at him. I'm a fucking idiot. Midoriya made no comment, only raising an eyebrow. He did, however, stop to look at him head-on. Bakugou looked at him expectantly, and when he saw Midoriya still didn't seem to get what he was attempting to do and groaned. Look, I'm trying to. He started to tap his feet against the floor, a surefire sign that he was getting a little worked up. Man, I really ain't good at these kind of things. It took Izuku merely another moment to catch on, eyes widening at the other. Bakugou, he was trying to apologize, wasn't he? God, is this what Todoroki meant? He must have like really good Todoroki senses or something. A new modern-day Spider-Man in the making. But at least Bakugou was trying. Midoriya looked down at his hands. He did get a little testy after he mentioned his mom, now that he thought back on it. And maybe he asked the wrong questions. He was just trying to get to know him. Maybe he was also in the wrong for avoiding him all this time. Texts had gone unanswered and ignored, and he swore he'd even heard a knock on his door late one evening. When he went to check, no one had been there though. He frowned. Taking a moment to look down at his shoes, he sighed and continued. Bakugou, I'm still really sorry about spilling coffee on you, even if that was quite some time ago and prying too much, I guess. Things should happen more naturally, so I'm sorry for that. He looked on tentatively as Bakugou stared him down. Arms that were folded seemed to relax a little more, the knot in his forehead getting smaller. The blonde sighed. I'd sorry for being really shitty. Midoriya looked at him with a small frown. Is that all? I went a little overboard and acted. He seemed to be really forcing himself to say his next few words. Childish. I'm also sorry about that. You're pretty all right. Midoriya was about to say something when he continued. I have a stupid temper, and I say stupid shit. That is true. You're pushing it. Midoriya snorted, hand quickly covering his mouth. Sorry. He forced himself to stop biting his nails. He didn't even know when he'd started biting. Force of habit, it seems. The sound of Bakugou's feet shifting against the floor made him look up again. He seemed to be thinking over his words again before he edged closer to him. Can you even forgive this half-assed apology? I doubt you'd want to. Midoriya quietly watched him, hands pursed under his chin in thought. Bakugou stared back in wait, though there was a certain air of uncertainty surrounding him in that moment. But he looked hopeful. Okay. Right, I expected you'd say so. I'll never bother you again. Shit, I'll go. He blinked. Wait. Huh? I said okay, you big doofus. I forgive you. He shifted. Just, let's not do all this again, all right? Well, Bakugou held out his hand, albeit a bit unsurely. Shake on it, Midoriya smiled. What is this, some kind of business deal? And what exactly are we shaking on? This might look like we just agreed on a crime or something. Despite his words, he found himself placing his hand on top of Bakugou's. He was warm, and he could feel the way his pulse quickened for a moment. Relief flashed in the blonde's eyes before it was gone. Whatever floats your boat, shorty. He even gave him a small smile at that. He actually missed his company. God, who even says that phrase anymore? Nonetheless, Midoriya also found himself smiling. What neither expected was for the younger boy to go in for a quick hug. He snapped out of it in time to pull away with a cough. "Well, glad we could work this out. Wow, look at the time, I gotta go, see ya later, Bakugou." The blonde opened his mouth to say something, but Midoriya had already unlocked his door and dashed inside. The sound of the door closing quickly next to him. Bakugou furrowed his brows and stared at where the boy just stood, opting to turn around to his apartment when a young couple exited the elevator. He did not want to be around for their sappy shit. With the pointless argument out the way, Bakugou and Midoriya had fallen into a small sense of comfort again. It was tense at first in actuality, getting back into the slow rhythm of being around each other. But somehow things were working out. They'd mostly been hanging out together to watch shows, or to make a quick trip out to the store when Midoriya was in need of something small. Eyeing the dairy section one day, that's exactly how Midoriya somehow came to a glorious conclusion that he should surprise Bakugou with his amazing skills. They were decent at best, but a guy could dream all right. Regardless, he felt to actually try his hand at baking, just to show he cared, not because he could steadily feel himself falling into the pits of 𝗧𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗪 heart. First, the need to bake him something. He was going to go for something simple like cookies, or maybe chocolate fudge brownies. Who doesn't like chocolate fudge brownies? People with sad lives, that's who. Midoriya slapped his face and shook his head. He'd been daydreaming too long. Right. Game time. Languidly, he eyed the mixing spoon in front of him. He had a silly kiss the cook apron on, courtesy of his ridiculously buff PE teacher Toshinori, or All Might, as his class jokingly called him on account of his strong physique, that is. Even though Midoriya had only taken his class for extra credits, the man had quickly befriended them all. He was somehow akin to being a second and almost endearing dad at that. The man had caught his attention after class, these next few words making Midoriya frown. "I noticed you've been busy typing away during class, my boy. Is there a special someone who's caught your eye?" Midoriya barely had the chance to deny as he continued. "Don't worry about it. This will surely attract that special lady to you. Or, whatever you're into." His teacher broke out into a hearty laugh at that, the laugh morphing into something concerning as he started coughing up a storm. Midoriya remembered being very worried that day for the older man, dutifully forcing him to go to the nurse shortly after. Regardless, he seemed to be well and fine next class, shooting a thumbs up his way much to his bemusement. Midoriya hadn't questioned the situation much though. The man seemed to favor his overall attitude and work ethic in gym class, so why not take it? His attention turned back to the bowl in front of him, mentally preparing himself for the dreaded task of baking. Midoriya had already gotten all the ingredients ready and was about to get started when his phone rang. He dashed to get it, nearly spilling the sugar and muttering a curse as he looked at the caller ID. He didn't hesitate to answer and smiled happily. "Mom, hey." He shifted the phone between his ear and his shoulder, moving back towards the kitchen as he went to start on the batter. Well, make an attempt at starting it. "Yeah, I'm fine. School is going pretty good. Yay, I still have the job, 𝗵𝗃𝗍𝗄. Everyone's doing good." He smiled as she continued talking. "You should come over for the Christmas again if you can. I'm sure everyone would love to see you again. No, I'm not saying that just because they liked your cheesecake recipe." He gasped and dropped his spoon in the bowl. He had a wonderful idea that would help greatly lessen the chances of him burning down his apartment. "Mom, by the way, you're good at baking, right? Can you guide me through on how to make some brownies or something? I don't trust myself with the online recipe, really." He choked as she excitedly talked on the line. "No, it's for a friend. I don't have anyone like that, right? What do you mean I never bake?" "Meet him." "No. You can't meet him then." Despite being on the other line where she couldn't see, Midoriya covered his mouth. Well, that just gave away more than enough info. Way to go, Izuku. She'd be out for blood now. As bloody as someone as soft as his mom could get. She was just very curious, to say the least. Questions flying out left and right. Wincing, he held the phone away from his ear. "It's complicated as all. Wait. You want to come during Christmas after all? Ha. Okay, now seriously, please help me make this." His smile only softened as her sweet voice started to guide him through the process, and with a newfound motivation he got to work. Following her instructions were somehow both easy and nerve-wrackingly tricky. She tried stuffing a generation's worth of homemade recipes into his head at one point, while also urging him not to get the eggshells in the batter. His clumsy hands did it anyway, and it took him forever to juggle the phone in one hand and picking out the shells with the other. And it was only halfway through that call that he remembered he could put her on speakerphone. He couldn't believe how silly he'd been. By the time as he was done, his mom had already hung up with the promise to visit him soon, and that she must absolutely meet whoever it was that inspired him to want to actually bake something for them. She absolutely had to. The older he got, the more she seemed to be able to read him like a book, much to his apprehension. He had quickly changed the subject then, telling her how much he loved her and that he'd call again soon, not before sending her a quick picture of his finished masterpiece. The brownies were done, and so was he. Literally. Leaning against the kitchen counter, he gave himself a moment of peace to stretch. Tiredly, he eyed the mess on his countertops and the dirty dishes lying in the sink. He gave himself a few minutes to prepare himself, sighing as he rolled up his sleeves. Might as well get to it. The door had already been unlocked apparently, but Midoriya hadn't mentioned anything in his texts. Cautiously stepping through the threshold, Bakugou braced himself for the worst of things. Someone breaking into his home to rob the younger boy. Maybe somehow, even after all this time, he'd gotten the wrong apartment. Or better yet, the cool aid man finally being civil and using the door instead of busting in the wall for once in his fucking life. Anything was possible, really. When the blonde had come over, the very last thing he expected to see was Midoriya building a makeshift fort in his living room. He already had his softest blankets and pillows scattered about the ground, and now he was in the process of dragging a few chairs over to hang some more sheets on for coverage. He quickly averted his gaze as the boy's shirt rode up. A simple black and white striped tee at that, with some matching black shorts to boot. More than likely his pajamas or something. Better than that onesie he had on that one time though. Much better. Bakugou loudly cleared his throat. He felt pleased to get the other's attention, Midoriya meeting his watchful gaze. For some reason, the smile that followed after left Bakugou's stomach in knots. He wasn't sure if he was all right with that. "Ah, hey, you're here," he beamed. "Take off your shoes and help me put this bad boy up." He motioned towards the sheets with an excited hand. Bakugou stopped in the doorway, half a shoe already hanging off his foot. "Bad boy?" "Yes." He successfully pulled one of the sheets over. "The baddest boy." Bakugou rolled his eyes, shutting the door behind him with a foot. He made a point to keep eye contact as he locked the door. "I could make a better fort any day." Midoriya's lips pursed, teetering on the edge of a knowing smile. "That a challenge? Well..." Here Midoriya was taking him on like some big shot. Over a fort of all of things? But you wouldn't catch him backing down. Oh man, it was on. "Maybe." Midoriya shook his head. "Listen, we can do that later. We're running on a tight schedule here." Bakugou plopped down next to him with a soft thud. Putting his hand behind his head, he looked at the other. "The fuck is this tight schedule then? Movies, Mario Kart, and pizza? The 3 M's. Shit, you're right, that is pretty damn busy." "Exactly." He pointed at the fluffy set of blankets again. "Now help me set up our kingdom, brave soldier." "More like king." Midoriya gave him a bemused look. "My apartment, my rules. I'm the king." "That's fucking stupid, you nerd. You can't have 2 kings. Or can you?" Bakugou squinted at him. "Fine, do whatever you want." He watched the green-haired boy bounce unconsciously, his excitement radiating in waves as he seemed satisfied with the answer. His dopey little grin shouldn't have been so endearing, but it really was. He felt himself look away. This really wasn't good for his heart. He'd never admit that it was affected him this way at all though. Over his grave maybe, but no, not even then. The sound of the other shifting next to him caught his attention again, hyper-aware of their proximity. "Fort of the Royal King Duo, Castle Carefree." Midoriya lazily supplied. Bakugou snorted. "What, you have a better name?" Midoriya asked. "Mega Kingdom Killers." That just sounds like we're murdering everyone else's kingdoms though. Their losses. The mighty Firetron 5000 and 𝗵𝘃𝗁𝗵𝐴 ran everyone away. Midoriya stared blankly at Bakugou. "What? Those names are lame." Those names are great, you uncultured swine. He looked to see the other shake their head, a small smile on their face regardless. He looked up suddenly, green eyes meeting Bakugou's. Hey, do you think we should add Nightmare Kitchen to the busy list for tonight? I feel like watching people freak out in the kitchen suddenly. Cause big mood, you know? With the most serious face Bakugou could muster, he looked him in the face and said, It doesn't have in it though. Disqualified. Caught off guard, Midoriya chuckled. Suddenly, he wondered who would win in a shouting and insult contest. Gordon Ramsay or Bakugou? How would that even work? Wait, could Bakugou outcook Gordon? Midoriya could feel himself going down into a long spiral of questions he didn't have answers to. He was mid-thought in the logistics of a cook-off between the two when he was thankfully snapped out of his musings. The doorbell rang. That must be the 𝗵𝗃𝗲𝗄. Bakugou grunted in response, catching a part of their fort that chose that exact moment to start falling down. He paid Midoriya no mind as he got up to get the door and pay. He came back a few minutes later, 2 large boxes of pizza in hand and a large bottle of iced tea. He carefully placed the drink on the ground as Bakugou snagged the pizza boxes from him. The younger boy plopped down next to him, getting comfortable and glancing at him one more time. He had a movie up already, opting to let the blonde choose another one after this. We good to start? He nodded, hands already reaching for 2 slices of pizza. The ones that had the jalapenos on them, much to Midoriya's amusement. The more he learned about Bakugou, the more he realized the guy had a thing for spicy food. Midoriya himself physically could not handle the spices after a certain level of hotness, so it was just interesting to see in action. They got 3.5 hours into their shows, 1 box and a quart of all the pizza gone, more than half of the iced tea also gone before Bakugou yawned. Midoriya turned to look at him tiredly. Their energy levels had both winded down after one too many bad movie puns and yelling at the screen at Rick Grimes once again. Maybe they got a little too into it. He hoped his neighbors didn't mind. Midoriya felt himself yawning shortly after. Want to turn in for the night? I guess. I can come back tomorrow if you want. My bed feels like utter shit lately anyway. Midoriya nearly spilled his drink, eyes widening slightly. It's cause of my shitty pillows, I bet. Oh, okay, yeah, the pillows. He wasn't insinuating sleeping over in his bed. Midoriya really needed some rest. I told you to buy some new pillows earlier, that's what you get. Bakugou scoffed and made his way out of the fort to stand. He stretched and, much to Midoriya's amusement, made the funniest noise as his body relaxed. He even heard his back crack a little. Why he felt so tickled about that, Midoriya was unsure. Wait. He sat up. Before you leave, he stopped him in the doorway. Stay there 1 sec. Izuku darted to the kitchen. He reached into the fridge to get his baked goods, making his way to Bakugou and quickly shoving them into his hands. The cookies had been placed into a nice cotton sheer bag, the outside fabric being really cheesy and had a picture of a dog pasted all around it. He'd even wrapped it up nicely for him. Midoriya cleared his throat as Bakugou stared at the bag in silence for a bit. He looked up at Midoriya questioningly before pausing to take one out of the bag and inspect it silently. 𝗧𝗕 carefully placed it back in the wrapping before raising a brow in the other's direction. Almost quietly he spoke. These are for me? Maybe. It's not really that big of a deal. He rushed out. He internally winced at himself, rubbing his forearm nervously. Try one, he said a bit softer. Bakugou grabbed one of the baked goods and examined it again before taking a big bite. He watched for the other's reaction. Yikes, it's horrible. Wah. The fucking worst, he said, taking another and shoving it into his mouth. He couldn't stop the small grin on his face as he took in Midoriya's expression. You call these brownies? Midoriya's mouth hung agape as he watched him continue to eat. He closed it and felt himself forming a small smile before hitting Bakugou in the shoulder. The blonde barely budged as he chewed. Shut up. He waited for Bakugou to actually swallow the confections before he choked right then and there in his doorway, and he really didn't want that. Almost offhandedly heard him say, They're good. Midoriya stooled a little straighter. Are really? Yeah, Bakugou licked his fingers then, the motion distracting him as he watched. Midoriya swallowed and looked at his feet. Bakugou's smile only grew. Could have toned down the sugar though. Midoriya adamantly shook his head. Tough cookies. No pun intended. There's never not enough sugar. That's two negatives, you nerd. Yeah, well, bite me. When he saw Bakugou actually leaning towards him, he yelped, holding his hands up in surrender, and quickly saying, No it. Don't actually bite me. Bite the treats, I take it all back. Midoriya felt his heart stutter. Bakugou's laugh came after, though a bit muffled due to the food in his mouth. It was a bit wild, but it was the sound of someone who was absolutely dated nonetheless. Even with some leftover cookie crumbs near his mouth, his laugh was nice. It was the kind that you could feel resonating deep in your chest. He wanted to hear it again, if he ever got the chance to. That smile definitely made all W's hard work of baking worth it. With a new air hanging around the two of them, much lighter and less tense than before, Bakugou made his way to his apartment, leaving with a low goodnight. Midoriya glanced back at his kitchen for a long time. He looked down at his hands, slowly moving them to rest over his chest, and shakily he sighed. Maybe he should cook more often.